When I bought my place on the edge of Willow Creek, I thought I was finally getting away from all the noise. No city chaos, no nosy bosses, just wide skies, tall trees, and a workshop out back where I could tinker in peace. For the first few weeks, it was heaven. Then came Valerie. Valerie Grant wasn't just a neighbor, she was the self-appointed queen of the Willow Creek Neighborhood Association. Picture-pressed suits, pearl earrings, and a voice sharp enough to slice steel, if you so much as left a trash bin out an extra hour. Valerie was the type to write you a formal complaint letter and slide it into your mailbox. At first I tried to stay polite, keep my head down, nod and smile. But I learned real quick, politeness doesn't work with people like her. It started with my workshop, nothing fancy, just a small shed where I kept my tools. Built a few projects, maybe spent a late night fixing up my old pickup. To me it was part of the dream. To Valerie, it was an eyesore that didn't meet neighborhood standards. One morning, I came outside to find a bright yellow slip taped right to the door. Violation noticed, unauthorized structure. I stood there in my flannel shirt, coffee steaming in my hand, staring at the paper in disbelief. Unauthorized. The shed had been there since the 70s, long before her association even existed. That was the first warning shot. By the end of the week, I had 3 more notices stuffed in my mailbox. Noise complaints, parking violations, even one about my grass being half an inch too long. I realized quick that this wasn't about rules. This was about control, and Valerie wasn't going to stop until I bent the knee. But here's the thing about me. I don't bend easy. Asterisk after the first few violation notices, I thought Valerie was just trying to scare me. Maybe if I ignored her long enough, she'd move on to harassing somebody else. But I was wrong. See, people like Valerie don't back down when you ignore them. They double down. A week later I woke up to hammering sounds outside. I pulled back the curtain, and what do I see? Valerie herself, standing in my driveway with 2 neighborhood association lackeys in their matching navy polos, hammering a bright red stop work order sign right into the dirt by my shed. I stormed out the front door, still in my work boots and yesterday's jeans. What the hell do you think you're doing? I barked. Valerie didn't even flinch. She just folded her arms and said, "This property is under association review. Until we say otherwise, you are not permitted to use this structure." I laughed out loud. Association review? Lady, this shed's been here longer than you've lived on this street. One of her sidekicks, a wiry guy with glasses and a clipboard, cleared his throat and said, "According to Section 4.2, subdivision standards, unauthorized outbuildings are prohibited." I stared at him. "Buddy, this isn't a subdivision. It's my land." Valerie smirked, like she'd been waiting for that line. "Ethan, you need to understand. The Willow Creek Association sets the standards for everyone in this community. If you can't follow the rules, maybe this neighborhood isn't the right fit for you." That was the moment I knew. This wasn't about my shed. It wasn't about noise, or grass, or trucks. This was about her flexing power. And the more I resisted, the harder she pushed. The next week I started getting strange letters in the mail. Fake fines, hundreds of dollars for parking violations and community disruption. One even claimed I owed $250 for refusal to comply with association landscaping policy. I showed the letters to my buddy Hank, a retired rancher who lived 2 houses down. He spit his tobacco into the dirt and shook his head. "Yep, that's Valerie's game. She's been running this street like a kingdom for years. Most folks just pay up to shut her up." "Well, I'm not most folks," I muttered. He chuckled. "Careful, son. You're poking the bear now." And boy, was he right. One night, just after dark, I caught Valerie and her crew sneaking around the side of my shed with flashlights. I flipped on the floodlights and shouted, "You trespassing on my land now." They froze like deer in headlights. Valerie hissed, "We're conducting an inspection." "Not without a warrant." "You're not." They scurried off, muttering threats about taking this to the board. That was the last straw for me. Up until then, I'd been patching holes, arguing back, trying to reason with them. But after that night, I realized there was no reasoning with people like Valerie. If she wanted a war, she just declared it. And I don't lose wars on my own land. Asterisk by this point, Valerie wasn't just a nuisance. She was a full-blown problem. Everywhere I turned, there she was, at the mailbox, glaring at me, on the street, arms folded, whispering to her little board members. She even started driving past my property slowly, windows rolled down, like she was patrolling her kingdom. It was harassment, plain and simple. And I knew it was only a matter of time before she pushed things to the next level. Sure enough, one morning I woke up to the sound of an engine revving in my driveway. I threw on my boots, stepped outside, and there she was, Valerie in her shiny silver SUV, parked half across my gravel path, blocking my truck in. I walked over calmly. "You're on my property again." She leaned out her window, sunglasses flashing in the sun. "This road is community access. You can't block it." I bit down on my temper. "This isn't community access. It's my driveway. You're trespassing." Her lips curled into that smug smile I'd come to hate. "We'll see what the board has to say about that." Behind her, 2 association officers in their matching navy polos stood by, clipboards in hand, like backup dancers in a bad play. One of them even had the nerve to snap a photo of me, as if I was the criminal here. That was it. I climbed into my old Chevy pickup, started it up, and rolled forward until my bumper was inches from her SUV. My message was clear: move or get pushed for the first time. I saw her confidence crack. She huffed, threw her SUV into reverse, and peeled off down the street, tires spitting gravel. The HOA officers scrambled after her, shouting something about filing a report. I didn't care. What mattered was this: Valerie finally realized I wasn't going to roll over. But of course, she didn't stop. People like her never do. That the very next day I found a giant red sticker slapped across my shed door. Condemned unsafe structure. Condemned my own shed by a bunch of neighbors with clipboards that night. As I peeled the sticker off, I sat down on my porch and thought long and hard. If I kept playing defense, Valerie would just keep finding new ways to push me. Fake fines, trespassing, stickers, harassment. No, I needed to stop reacting. I needed to take control. That's when an idea hit me. I had spent 30 years as a builder. I knew how to design things that could take a beating and still stand tall. And if Valerie wanted to keep testing me, then maybe it was time I gave her something she couldn't push past. The shed wasn't the problem. The problem was letting her think she could bully me. So I decided to build something. Not just a repair, not just a patch, a statement. Something that would end this standoff once and for all. And let me tell you, once I started drawing up the plans in my head, I actually smiled for the first time in weeks, because Valerie had no idea what was coming. After weeks of dealing with Valerie's antics, I was worn down but not beaten. And if she thought she could bully me forever, she was about to find out I wasn't the kind of man who folds under pressure that night. I sat at my kitchen table with a blank notepad, a cup of strong coffee, and 3 decades of building experience tucked away in my hands. I started sketching. Not blueprints for a house, not plans for a barn, but something far more personal. A defense, a message, a trap. See, I'd spent years building things that were made to last. I'd put up houses strong enough to take a hurricane, barns sturdy enough to stand through Midwest storms, even bridges that carried thousands of cars without shifting an inch. If I could build for that, then surely I could build something that one stubborn HOA president couldn't break. I decided to start with steel. The next morning, I drove down to an old salvage yard just outside town. Rows of rusted beams and discarded construction scraps stretched as far as the eye could see. Most folks saw junk. I saw potential. I picked out thick steel posts, the kind used in commercial jobs, each weighing a few hundred pounds. They were weathered, sure, but solid as bedrock. Then I loaded up sheets of angle iron rebar and heavy brackets, stacking my old Chevy until it sagged under the weight. Back home, I got to work. First, the posts. I didn't just set them in dirt like a normal fence. No, I dug 6 feet down, mixed concrete, and planted each one like it was the foundation of a skyscraper. By the time I was done, those posts weren't just in the ground, they were part of the ground. Next came the frame. I cut the steel, welded the joints, and bolted crossbeams in place until it stood like a fortress. Sweat rolled down my back, sparks rained around me, the smell of hot metal filled the air. My dogs lay in the shade nearby, heads tilted like they knew their master was preparing for war. But here's the clever part. I didn't want Valerie to see what I was really building. So once the steel skeleton was complete, I covered it with thick cedar planks, just like the old ones she'd been tearing down. From the street, it looked like the same weathered wooden gate she'd crashed through a dozen times. To anyone passing by, nothing looked different. But behind that wood was a wall of steel. And I wasn't finished yet. I thought back to every time her SUV had roared through my property, tires chewing up the gravel, headlights glaring like she owned the place. That memory gave me my next idea: the tire spikes. I dug shallow trenches right behind the gate and lined them with steel spikes, sharp, angled teeth hidden under a fresh layer of gravel, invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. If anyone tried to ram through again, they wouldn't just hit a wall of steel. Their tires would shred to ribbons before they even knew what happened. For days I worked, sunrise to sunset, welding, cutting, hammering, pouring sweat into every beam and bracket. By the end of the week, my hands were blistered, my arms ached, but I had built something I was proud of, not just a gate, a statement. One evening, while I was finishing the last weld, my neighbor Hank stopped by. He leaned against the fence, chewing a piece of straw, watching sparks fly as I worked. "You know you're asking for trouble, right?" he said with a chuckle. I flipped my mask up and wiped the sweat from my forehead. "Trouble's already here, Hank. Might as well be ready for it," he grinned. "Fair enough. You need a hand." So together we finished it, bolting the final plates, tightening the hinges, testing the swing. When we finally stepped back, we admired the finished product. On the outside it looked plain, just another country gate, a little rough, a little rustic, nothing that would draw attention. But inside, it was a fortress. That night, I sat on my porch, dogs at my feet, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The crickets chirped, the air smelled like cut grass, and for the first time in weeks I felt calm because I knew the next time Valerie came barreling down my drive, expecting to bulldoze her way through like always. She wouldn't be met with splinters and broken hinges. She'd be met with steel spikes and consequences. And I couldn't wait to see the look on her face. Asterisk. It didn't take long. Only a few days after I finished the gate, I heard the distant growl of an engine, low and hungry, chewing up the gravel road like thunder rolling in. I was sitting on my porch with a cup of coffee, dogs stretched at my feet, when that sound reached my ears, and I knew instantly. Valerie, sure enough, her silver SUV appeared over the hill, shining like some armored beast. Sunlight glared off the hood, and I swear she pressed the gas harder when she spotted my wooden gate waiting for her at the bottom of the drive. And of course, she didn't come alone. Behind her rolled the association convoy, the treasurer's maroon minivan with its SCA strong bumper sticker, and another board member's black sedan. They weren't just driving, they were parading, like soldiers following their queen into battle. I leaned back in my chair, calm as a preacher on Sunday morning. My coffee was still warm. The SUV roared closer, dust clouds spilling across the wheat fields, the ground trembling under the weight of her tires. She didn't slow down, not one bit. Then it happened. Her bumper slammed into the gate. The sound wasn't the usual crack of splintering wood. No, it was the deafening clang of steel meeting steel. Sparks flew, tires screeched, and the entire front end of her SUV folded in like a crushed soda can. Airbags burst open, white smoke filling the cab, but she wasn't done moving. Momentum carried her forward right into the trap. Pop, pop, pop. One by one, her tires shredded as they hit the hidden spikes. Rubber exploded, rims dug into gravel, and within seconds, her luxury SUV sagged against the gate, crippled and groaning like a wounded animal. The minivan behind her swerved, brakes squealing, skidding into the ditch. The black sedan slammed to a stop just short of rear-ending them, horn blaring in panic, and then silence. The dust settled. The air smelled of burnt rubber and leaking coolant. The only sounds were the faint hiss of busted tires and the steady panting of my dogs. For a moment, nobody moved. Then her driver's door creaked open. Valerie stepped out, red blazer covered in dust, sunglasses hanging crooked, hair a mess for the first time I'd ever seen. Her face was twisted with fury. She pointed a shaking finger at me across the yard. You set a trap. You could have killed me. She screamed. I didn't even stand. I just sipped my coffee. Calm as ever. No, Valerie. I built a gate. You chose to ram it. The HOA treasurer crawled out of the minivan, limping, still clutching his clipboard like it was a shield. The other board member just sat frozen in his car, staring at the scene with wide eyes. Neighbors started gathering at the edge of the road, phones raised, recording every second. Some chuckled. One man muttered, "Looks like the queen lost her crown." That earned laughter from the crowd. Valerie spun on them, shrieking, "This is criminal. He endangered all of us." But the more she yelled, the harder people laughed. I finally stood walking slowly down from the porch, dogs at my side. When I reached the wreck, I tapped the twisted hood with my boot. "Shortcuts closed," I said plainly. The crowd erupted in cheers and whistles, and that's when the sheriff's cruiser rolled up, lights flashing. He stepped out, surveying the mangled SUV, the spikes glinting under gravel, the neighbors all grinning. "What in the world happened here?" he asked. Valerie practically lunged at him, voice shrill and cracking. "He set a trap. He destroyed my car. He's a danger to the whole community." The sheriff turned to me. I kept my voice steady. "She's been trespassing for weeks, ignoring warnings. I reinforced my gate. Cameras caught every single time she broke through. Everything's on record." The sheriff raised an eyebrow, then looked at the wreck again. "Well, if that's true, looks to me like the only crime here is trespassing." The neighbors roared with laughter and applause. Phones kept rolling, capturing every moment. Valerie's face went pale. She looked from the sheriff to me, to the crowd recording her humiliation. For the first time, she had nothing to say. I took one last sip of my coffee, then set the cup on the gatepost, and as she stood there shaking with rage, surrounded by broken metal, popped tires, and neighbors laughing at her, I thought, every bully eventually finds a wall they can't break, and she just met mine. Now, you'd think after smashing her SUV into my gate, Valerie would have finally learned her lesson. But people like her, they don't admit defeat. They regroup, they plot, and they come back twice as nasty. The very next morning, I found a thick envelope stuffed into my mailbox. Heavy paper, official-looking seals. Her name scrawled on the return address in smug cursive. I tore it open at my kitchen table, coffee steaming beside me. Notice of legal action. According to Valerie and her HOA board, I was being sued for reckless endangerment, property damage, and obstruction of a community easement. They demanded I remove my gate immediately, pay for repairs to her SUV, and compensate the HOA for emotional distress. I sat there reading the pages, and then I laughed. A long, hard laugh that probably scared my dogs. After weeks of trespassing, harassment, and fake fines, she was actually trying to paint me as the criminal. I wasn't about to let that slide. That same afternoon, I drove into town and met with an attorney named Martha. She was sharp as a tack, hair tied back, glasses perched low on her nose, the kind of woman who didn't waste time on nonsense. She spread the papers across her desk, skimmed them, and smirked. "Classic HOA power grab," she said. "They're bluffing, hoping you'll fold. But from what you're telling me, they don't have a leg to stand on." I leaned forward. "Good, because I don't fold." She nodded. "Then we're not just going to fight this. We're going to hit them back." Within a week, Martha filed a countersuit: trespassing, property destruction, harassment, fraud through fake fines. And the best part, we had the evidence: hours of camera footage showing Valerie ramming through the gate, HOA members following her, even the big crash itself. Word spread fast. Before long, Valerie wasn't just battling me, she was battling her own reputation. Neighbors whispered in the grocery store. Folks who had once kept their heads down started stepping forward with stories of their own. Fines for leaving Christmas lights up too long, threats over flower beds that didn't match community color schemes, even late-night inspections, where Valerie and her officers trespassed onto lawns with flashlights, just like they'd done to me. The image of the perfect HOA queen was cracking, and then came the court date. The courthouse smelled of polished wood and old paper. I sat at the defendant's table in my cleanest flannel. Boots shined, Martha calm beside me. Across the aisle, Valerie sat stiff-backed in a blazing red suit, lips pursed, sunglasses perched on her head like a crown. Her board members trailed behind, pale and jittery, still clutching their clipboards like security blankets. Her lawyer went first. He spun a tale about how I was some unstable loner who had built a booby-trapped gate to endanger the community. He painted me as reckless, unneighborly, a man too stubborn to follow rules. I could see Valerie nodding along, chin high, convinced she was winning. Then Martha stood. Her voice was calm, precise, and sharp enough to cut glass. "Your Honor," she began, "the evidence will show that my client's land is not and has never been under HOA jurisdiction. These fines and claims are fraudulent. And as for endangerment," she clicked a remote, and the courtroom screen lit up. There it was, Valerie's SUV slamming into my gate, airbags bursting, tires popping. The footage rolled again from a different angle. Then came earlier clips: Valerie smashing through the gate week after week, neighbors laughing as she shouted about community easements, officers trespassing with clipboards at night. The gallery buzzed. Even the judge raised an eyebrow. Valerie's lawyer stammered, tried to object, but the judge waved him down. When Valerie herself took the stand, her mask cracked. She shouted about her authority, claimed I had no right to say no, even blurted out, "I am the president, he can't defy me." The judge banged his gavel. "This is a courtroom, not your board meeting. Sit down." By the end of it, the ruling was clear. The HOA's claims dismissed, my count upheld. The judge ordered the association to pay damages for trespassing and property destruction. Valerie herself was fined for harassment and reckless driving. And here's the cherry on top: all the footage became public record. It didn't take long before clips started showing up online. One video went viral. Slow-motion footage of her SUV crumpling against my gate, set to dramatic music, with the caption, "You shall not pass." Another was titled, "HOA President versus Farmers Gate of Justice." The internet tore her apart. Memes spread. Neighbors laughed openly when she drove by in her rental car. Within weeks, board members resigned left and right, not wanting to sync with her. By the end of the month, the Willow Creek Association was broke, drained by legal fees, and left with nothing but a ruined reputation. And Valerie, she went from self-crowned queen to neighborhood outcast. As for me, I went home, sat on my porch, and watched the sunset behind my unbroken gate. My dogs curled up at my feet. The air smelled sweet, quiet, free. And for the first time in a long while, I felt like I'd won. After the courtroom dust settled, life at Willow Creek finally quieted down. The HOA, what was left of it, limped along without Valerie's iron grip. Meetings went from heated battles about violations to simple chats about block parties and lawn sales. The neighbors, once fearful of her clipboard and sharp tongue, started breathing easy again. And Valerie, she kept her head down. No more parades in her SUV, no more red suits and sunglasses, patrolling like she owned the place. Her reign was over, and everyone knew it. As for me, mornings became peaceful again. I'd wake up, brew a pot of coffee, and step out onto my porch with my dogs. The air was fresh, the wheat fields swayed in the breeze, and my gate stood tall and unbroken at the end of the drive. Sometimes I'd see cars slow down, neighbors pointing it out, maybe even snapping a quick photo. The Gate of Justice, they called it. Some folks even joked that it should be a local landmark. And honestly, I didn't mind that, because to me it wasn't just a gate. It was a reminder that you can't let bullies walk all over you. That no matter how loud someone shouts or how official their papers look, the truth in a little backbone can stand taller than all their lies. Valerie thought she had power because she had a title. But the real power, that comes from knowing your rights and standing your ground. Looking back, I realized this whole ordeal wasn't really about a shed or a gate. It was about boundaries and the courage it takes to defend them. Life will always have people like Valerie, People who think rules don't apply to them. People who treat your no like it's negotiable. People who push and push and push, waiting to see if you'll bend. And when that happens, you've got two choices: roll over or build your own kind of gate. So here's my question for you. What's your gate? What boundary in your life do you need to stand up for? Because trust me, once you build it, once you make it clear, you won't be pushed around. The bullies, the Karens, the Valeries of the world, they find out real quick they're not as powerful as they thought. And that's a lesson worth learning.